Hi, I'm Erin Knightley, and I decided today that I wanted to have a little bit of fun with the background, so hey, look, the Biltmore house. What better to inspire the Regency feel outside of being in England than to have a little bit of gorgeous 125,000 square foot fun. Okay, so how about we do a little bit of an excerpt. This is Flirting with Fortune, and let's dive in. So this is the lady who belongs to the scent of lilacs. How lovely of you to come out and join me. He was amused. She was not. Never mind that the almost musical lilt of his Scottish-tinged accent sent a shiver down the back of Bee's already chilled neck. If he knew she was there, he should have had the decency to say as much. Embarrassment stiffened her spine. Lord, she must look a fool. With as much dignity as one in her position could muster, she extracted herself from the heavy drapes and shook at her skirts. Yes, well, since you wouldn't leave like a proper gentleman, it seems as though I had little choice. He lifted a dark eyebrow, tilting his head just enough so that the lock of midnight black hair fell across his temple. I do beg your pardon. I should have left the moment I realized there was a debutante-shaped lump behind the curtains. Well, when you put it like that, she lifted her chin regally. Pardon granted, Mr. She waited, but he didn't take the bait. Instead, he pushed away from the wall, closing the distance between them with measured, unhurried steps. He wasn't overly tall, but he had a certain presence about him, as if he could command an army if so inclined. She couldn't have taken her eyes from him if she wanted to. With every step he took, her heartbeat seemed to increase, until it fluttered like a caged bird beneath her breast. He wasn't traditionally handsome, not like her brother or even her brother-in-law. His appeal was much more intense than that. His jaw looked as sharp as if it was carved from granite and already possessed the slightest hint of dark stubble. His cheeks angled high, almost like a woman's, but his broad, masculine brow provided exactly enough counterbalance to give his features exquisite symmetry and depth. Such unique beauty made her fingers itch to take up her brushes and commit his visage to canvas. Her gaze was too bold by half, but he didn't seem to mind her inspection. In fact, he watched her right back, his flint-colored eyes seeming to take in everything about her, leaving her feeling quite exposed. Now, we have not been introduced. I wouldn't want to break protocol on my very first ball. Unless, of course, it is your wish, Miss. Beatrice almost smiled. She'd as soon walk naked through the ballroom than tell him who she was. A lady did not get caught hiding behind the curtains. Yes, well, I suppose rules are rules. She realized then the importance of what he had said. This was his first ball. There was no doubt in her mind that he was the mystery guest Lady Shirley was so eager to present. Who was this man? He was 25 if he were a day, so why had he never been to a ball? Beatrice's curiosity rebelled with an almost physical force, but she firmly tamped it down. She was dying to know who he was, this man with the lyrical voice, compelling features, and unmistakable air of mystery, but not at the price of revealing her own identity. Indeed. He paused at exactly the proper distance away and folded his arms, considering her. Although I suspect that you do not always play by the rules. He nodded to the curtains behind her. This time she did smile. My character exposed in 2 minutes or less. Alas, I cannot deny it. Following the rules will gain you naught but a stellar reputation and a tremendously boring life. Her older siblings, Evie and Richard, had taught her that much. His answering smile was nearly as delicious as his accent, his perfectly bowed upper lip curving to reveal beautiful white teeth. Beatrice pressed her lips together. She hated the crooked front tooth that marred her own smile. Then you'd think me very tedious indeed, I'm afraid, he said, mock regret weighing his tone. I must admit, I'm a rule follower to a fault. She very nearly rolled her eyes. Any man with a face like that couldn't possibly be boring. I don't believe you. If you were a rule follower, you would never have waited for me to emerge. Speaking alone with a strange female in a darkened gallery is not exactly perfect protocol. His grin widened as he lifted a shoulder in a sort of half-shrug. Then it is a very good thing that you do not know my name. I'd hate to have to be bandied about that I was anything less than a perfect gentleman upon my entrance into society. And if we encounter each other by chance? Then I'll throw myself upon your mercy to protect my reputation. In fact, perhaps I should do so now, preemptively, so as to know I'm safe." She crossed her arms and nodded, unable to resist playing along. There was something about the anonymity of the moment that was almost intoxicating, like a first sip of champagne. "Very well, you may commence groveling." He dipped his head gravely. "As you wish, though I wonder how I should address you." He took in her elegant gown and emeralds decorating her ears and neck. "Princess, perhaps." "I should think not," she said, wrinkling her nose. That was the very last thing she wished to be called. Though she was the daughter of a marquess, she was no overly privileged, dreadfully coddled princess. "I value my freedom much too fervently for that." Clearly, even in the low light, she could see the irony in his gaze, which was a good thing, since it was deuced hard to detect in the lilt of his accent. "A story, then. It suits you, I think." "A story? How on earth does that suit me?" "Not a story," he said, pantomiming, opening a book. "A story. My treasure." She sucked in a surprised breath, warmth infusing her whole body before flooding her face. His treasure? Her heart shuddered within her. There was something shockingly intimate about being called such a thing by a near-complete stranger. Before she could think of a response, he chuckled. "As in buried treasure, unearthed from the depths of the curtains? I didn't mean to imply anything else." "Of course not," she replied, nodding, as though her mind hadn't gone exactly to that something else. "You may call me whatever you wish. Now, on with the groveling, if you please. I'll be missed if I remain much longer." She hoped the soft strains of music from the ballroom disguised the breathlessness of her voice. He stepped forward, bringing them closer than even the most liberal of hosts would have deemed proper. He put a hand to his heart and dipped his head to hers. Mischief lit his eyes, subtly challenging her. She blinked. Why did he suddenly look so familiar? "I beg you, Astori, from the very depths of me, could you find it in your heart to have mercy on my depraved soul? Could you carry this encounter close to your breast, not to reveal it under threat of death, or worse, gossip?" Good heavens, he was positively mesmerizing when he put his mind to it. The soft, lilting tones of his voice washed over her skin like warm silk, and she only just suppressed the shiver that flitted down her spine. Doing her best to sound lightly amused, she said, "Very well, you have my mercy. It was a pleasure not to meet you, sir. I do hope that you enjoy the ball." With a reluctance that surprised her, she started to turn. "Perhaps," he said, drawing her attention to him once more, "you'd save a dance for me?" She lifted her brow. "Ah, but that would require an introduction, would it not?" Even so, the offer was absurdly tempting. The idea of being pulled into his arms was enough to make her forget that dancing wasn't her forte. "An excellent point, to which I offer this solution. If, by the end of the night, you wish to take me up on my offer, then I leave it to you to seek an introduction to me, seeing how I now have assurance of your mercy, of course." Beatrice drooped back in surprise. "Seek an introduction to you? I do hate to disabuse you of whatever opinion you have formed of me in these past few minutes, but I am not a desperate woman. I assure you, I will be seeking an introduction to no one." He didn't look the least bit disappointed, or the slightest bit offended. Instead, the corners of his eyes crinkled in an almost imperceptible smile. Dipping his head in the approximation of a bow, he said, "Your prerogative. However, I do feel it prudent to clarify that I was giving you the option not to be introduced, should you wish to remain anonymous. I assure you it was not meant to disparage your prospects. I, of course, shall respect your decision." He certainly had a way with words. Was it the accent or his sentiment that muddled her brain and had her leaning the slightest bit forward? Thank you?" Already she was feeling like a ninny for having reacted as she did. "You're welcome. And just so you know," he said, slipping a gloved hand beneath hers and lifting her fingers to his lips for a feather-soft kiss that had her holding her breath all over again, "I'll be keeping the last dance free." I hope you enjoyed a little snippet of Flirting with Fortune and the beautiful scenery behind me. Have a great day.